We're live. All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Kirsten Short, Chief Epidemiologist with the Houston Health Department, joining you here for a Measles 101. We will wait just a moment for people to hop on board and join us, and then we'll get started. All right, everybody, we're just giving folks time to join us. We're just at noon, so just a few moments and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, everybody. I think we've got some folks coming on board and joining us. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirsten Short. I'm the Chief of Epidemiologist here at the Houston Health Department, and I am here to do a real quick Measles 101 with you guys. So we have a new platform this time, so we should not have any technical problems. Excited about that as well. So if you have any questions or any thoughts, go ahead and post them in the comments, and I should be able to see them on the side of the screen over here. In the meantime, I was thinking about how we could get started. And I had a couple different thoughts. And I think the first thing that I want to start with is I'm not usually here to sort of put a bunch of numbers in front of you. But I do want to say, right, when we look at how many measles cases have been reported in the United States here in 2025, we've had, and I'm going to look at my notes now, 378 cases as of Friday, the March 20th. And 90% of those are associated with outbreaks, most of them being primarily the large outbreak that we have ongoing in West Texas that is spread over into New Mexico and has been linked to some cases up in Ohio. But that also means that 37 cases are not attributed to the outbreak and have been reported in just the first 3 months in the United States. And I bring this up because it's 37 cases across about 17 states. Each of those, or maybe you might have cases where it's about 2, are different introductions of measles into the United States. So generally, they're usually travel associated. And so someone who did not have likely a full level of protection traveled overseas, came in contact with somebody who was infectious with measles during their overseas travel. And when they came back to their community, they were incubating the virus and then developed measles and were tested and detected here in the United States. The vast majority of those have not spread up into an outbreak. And that's really why I bring this up, because when we don't have measles eliminated from the globe, right? So there's always a risk that we can have sort of these low levels of people doing travels, coming home, bringing measles back with them. But when they go into a community where we have these high levels of vaccines, again, we talk about 97 or 95% immunity to get that sort of protection, then that virus loses its chance to come in contact with unprotected people. And you don't get that more cases and more cases and more cases. But it's when that vaccine protection level drops that we see what we're seeing in West Texas and what we've seen in other outbreaks in years past when they get into a community with that lower level. And that's why you'll hear us continuing to talk about the best way to protect yourself, to protect others, to protect your community, to protect your loved ones, really, is by making sure that you are adequately protected. So I want to talk about 2 words. We want to talk that we use a lot here in epidemiology. We talk about an infectious period, and then we talk about an incubation period. And they're pretty important when we talk about measles. So an infectious period is the time frame where someone has an infection, right, the virus, and they can spread it to somebody else. Now, measles is one of those tricky viruses, right, where you are infectious from 4 days before your rash starts, and then you've got the day that your rash starts, over to 4 days after your rash has started. So a total of 9 days total. 4 before day of the rash, 4 after. And so those 4 days before the rash, you may not realize how ill you actually are. You may not realize the risk that you're putting in other people, and you're going out and about doing things, maybe seeking health care and things like that. And most measles cases aren't identified until after that rash shows up. So that's one of the tricky pieces. Now, I also want to talk about incubation period. Incubation period is the time when you might not have the virus yet, but you have been exposed to somebody. And that's the time from when you've been exposed through the duration that you might develop symptoms, if you're going to develop symptoms. So the incubation period for measles is 21 days. That means that if I didn't have immunity and I was exposed to somebody with measles today, I could develop measles symptoms possibly up to 21 days after today. So today would be what we would call day 0. Then day 1 would start tomorrow for 21 days. Most of the time you develop your symptoms within about 7 to 14 days, but it can go as long as 21 days. This is important because when we do our investigations into somebody who has measles and we're looking at those people who are exposed, if they don't have immunity, then they need to stay home, stay away from everybody, including other members of their household, until they are 21 days past that incubation period where they no longer are at risk of developing measles symptoms. So I want you to, kind of think about that, and how would you handle your life if that had to happen? So if you are a parent of a child that's not vaccinated, right, that's where you'd have to make sure that you had a way to take care of that child safely, right, away from others and things like that. So let's see. I see a question coming in. Is just being around someone with measles enough to get infected, or does it take direct contact? That's a really great question. So I will say we know that the more exposure time you had, the more that you have with someone, the greater your risk of developing measles, right? And so, for instance, living with someone who has measles, those household members, as we call them, people who live in that same house with that person or that same apartment, those are going to be the people at highest risk. But measles is a highly, highly, highly infectious virus. And so it can be that someone with measles is in a room, and if they leave that room and somebody else comes into that room within 1 to 2 hours afterwards, and they don't have immunity, they can still get infected, right? And so that, again, is one of those tricky things about measles, is it doesn't require that direct contact in the way that some other conditions do. So again, it really goes back to if you're concerned about measles, make sure that you're up to date on your vaccines and talk to your provider about that. Now, the other thing we know about the vaccines is there's a lot of evidence that shows that they give a really long immunity, right? And so, but if you're concerned, talk with your provider about whether or not it's appropriate to get another dose of the vaccine. We also know that it's okay to get an additional dose of the vaccine. So I hope that I answered that for you well. We are coming up close to the end of our time. So let me see, put out a call if anybody else wants to put any questions. Is there immediate immunity after getting the vaccine? That is a great question. So for most vaccines, it takes a while for your body to kind of recognize what the vaccine is and develop our immune response. So generally, it takes about 2 weeks to start to develop immunity. So you don't have immediate protection. And then remember, with measles, or not with measles, but with the MMR, it is a 2-dose series. So you get 1 dose, and regularly people get that, around 12 to 15 months of age. And then you get a second dose at 4 years. And that's sort of the official schedule. But it is okay to get a second dose within 28 days of that first dose. You can actually shorten that time period if you need to. So if you don't have immunity, you haven't been vaccinated for whatever reason it is in your life, and you want to look at getting vaccinated, you've got some travel coming up and you're starting to get concerned. If you need a full 2 doses, you really want to get that about 6 weeks before on that side. So even after having your child vaccinated, she might need to wear a mask for a week or 2 to stay protected. If you're going to an area where you think measles is actively circulating, then yeah, you want to get that vaccine as soon as possible, so you've got that length of time before that travel that's coming up. But again, remember, that's why we talk about kind of herd immunity, community immunity. If you're going into a community that has higher vaccine levels, the chances that she's going to encounter somebody with measles are going to be lower. But yes, if you're thinking about travel, if you're thinking about any of that, the best news is to go talk with your provider and see if you can get that started. All right, so we're right at the end of our time. Thank you so much. We will have another Measles 101 on Thursday. So feel free to come back in and tune in and keep talking with us, keep sending us your questions, and we'll try to get you answers.